Hold your breath, this next story is pretty incredible.
When a team of modern salvage divers dove into the Red Sea in late 2024, they weren't searching for gold, sunken ships, or forgotten cargo, they were chasing a legend buried in the pages of ancient scripture and wrapped in controversy. Nearly 50 years earlier, a man named Ron Wyatt claimed to have found something beneath those waters that, if true, could rock the foundations of archaeology and history alike, the remnants of Pharaoh's chariots from the biblical Exodus. Many had dismissed his claims as religious fantasy, a fringe theory at best, conspiracy at worst. But now, decades later, technology had finally caught up with curiosity, and what these divers found on the seafloor stunned even the most skeptical among them. The wheels they found weren't smooth or symmetrical, they were encrusted, rough, fossil-like structures sculpted by coral and time, but unmistakably artificial. Some were jagged, others bent by centuries of ocean currents, but many still retained the symmetry of spoked wheels. Beautiful in a haunting, almost otherworldly way. Scattered across the seabed were what appeared to be the coral-covered remains of ancient war machines, clustered eerily in the direction of the deep, as though frozen mid-pursuit. But these divers didn't stumble upon this mystery. This expedition had been meticulously planned in secret, launched under the radar from the port city of Aqaba, Jordan. A carefully selected crew of former Navy divers, underwater archaeologists, marine engineers, and AI technicians quietly assembled with a single goal, to reinvestigate a stretch of the Red Sea near Nuweiba Beach, directly opposite Saudi Arabia. This wasn't tourism, this wasn't science fiction, and it definitely wasn't amateur hour. This was a $3 million privately funded operation with state-of-the-art gear. Deep-sea drones equipped with AI-driven sonar imaging, submersible LiDAR scanners, underwater metal detectors, and high-resolution cameras capable of mapping sediment patterns with millimeter precision. These weren't explorers, they were engineers of discovery. But their mission almost never happened. Attempts to secure support through traditional academic channels were flat-out rejected. Universities mocked the theory, citing a lack of physical evidence and branding the entire venture pseudoscience. One senior Israeli antiquities official reportedly said, "There's nothing there but coral and dreams." Worse, several governments issued quiet warnings to steer clear of the area, citing marine protection laws, geopolitical sensitivity, and vague legal threats. But the divers pressed on. A group of anonymous backers stepped in, some curious millionaires, others evangelical donors with deep pockets and deeper convictions. They wanted answers. They wanted proof. And most importantly, they wanted to know if Ron Wyatt had been right all along. They made no press announcements, filed no public statements, and operated under full discretion. Still, secrets don't stay buried long. A single leaked image of the dive ship appeared online, captioned cryptically, "Back to where the Pharaoh fell." That's all it took. Conspiracy forums ignited. YouTube lit up. TikTok theologians went viral. Suddenly, Wyatt's long-dismissed story was trending again. The name that had been a punchline in academic circles was now back in the spotlight. Even political commentators jumped in. Greg Gutfeld, never one to shy away from sarcasm or skepticism, said on his show, "If they find chariot wheels in the Red Sea, I want a refund on every history class I've ever taken." The world watched as these divers descended into the mystery. And what they found might change everything. But before we dive further, we have to rewind, to the story that started it all. The Exodus. One of the oldest and most dramatic escape stories ever told. According to the Bible, the Israelites fled slavery in Egypt and were trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army. Then Moses, by divine command, raised his staff, and the waters split, forming walls on either side. The Israelites crossed safely, but when Pharaoh's chariots followed, the sea came crashing down. For thousands of years, this story has symbolized divine justice and faith in impossible moments. It's echoed in churches, synagogues, mosques, and even films. But for all its cultural and spiritual power, one massive question remains: did it really happen? The biblical text gives very few specifics on geography. That ambiguity has split scholars for centuries. Some believe the crossing happened in the marshy areas of Egypt's Nile Delta, possibly referring to the Sea of Reeds. Others suggest the Gulf of Suez. But one theory stands apart, bold, controversial, and persistent. It says the crossing happened at Nuweiba Beach on the Gulf of Aqaba, where the seafloor forms a natural land bridge extending from Egypt to Saudi Arabia. Supporters of this theory argue that the topography aligns perfectly with the Exodus story. The beach is massive, wide enough to accommodate thousands of people, and the seabed slopes gently across the Gulf. Could this be the ancient escape route? Mainstream historians aren't convinced. Renowned scholars like Israel Finkelstein argue that the Exodus is a national myth, a powerful story crafted during the Babylonian exile to unite a scattered people. According to that view, the Red Sea miracle never literally happened. It was metaphor, not memory. And perhaps the biggest strike against it? A lack of hard archaeological evidence. No discovered campsites. No weapons. No chariots. No bodies. Expeditions came and went, leaving only silence. And yet, one man's voice refused to fade. Ron Wyatt. A nurse anesthetist from Tennessee. No PhD. No university title. Just a conviction that the Bible wasn't just spiritually true, but historically real. In the late 70s, Wyatt left his medical practice to chase that belief. He said he found Noah's Ark in Turkey. Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia. The Ark of the Covenant buried beneath Jerusalem. Mainstream academia rolled their eyes. But then, in 1978, Wyatt dove into the Red Sea near Nuweiba Beach, and claimed he found the unthinkable. Chariot wheels. Human bones. Coral-covered remains of an army frozen in time. He spoke of 4-spoke, 6-spoke, even 8-spoke wheels. He claimed to have seen a shimmering gold-plated wheel lodged in the sand, possibly Pharaoh's personal chariot. He even reported crushed skulls and broken femurs, consistent with high-impact trauma. But he had no peer-reviewed research. No verifiable photos. No recovered artifacts. The Egyptian government barred him from excavation. Mainstream journals refused to touch his work. So Wyatt became a myth inside a myth, dismissed by experts, worshipped by believers. His grainy underwater photos circulated among church groups and low-budget documentaries. He was either a prophet or a fraud, depending on who you asked. But now, nearly 5 decades later, modern technology is giving his story new life. Because the divers who retraced his path didn't just find wheel-shaped coral. They found metallic readings where the hub of a wheel would be. They found a symmetry that didn't match natural coral formations. They found patterns in the seabed, lines of debris and bone fragments, all moving in one direction. They found a battlefield. They also found something else. Fear. One diver's radio cut in. This is not good. At first, they thought it was equipment failure. Then the helmet feed came through. Human remains. Dozens. Then hundreds. Skull fragments. Ribs. Vertebrae. All tangled with coral-encrusted spears, splintered wood, and what looked like pieces of horse armor. DNA analysis of a partially buried horse skull confirmed it belonged to a breed once used in Egyptian royal cavalry. The layout was chilling. These weren't scattered shipwreck victims. They were organized. Linear. As if they had been charging towards something, and died instantly. Some of the chariot wheels were so delicate, even brushing them with a gloved fingertip risked turning them to dust. Coral had preserved the shape but turned the material brittle. Metallurgists consulted via satellite confirmed that the mineral signatures matched late Bronze Age artifacts. The wheel outlines captured by sonar matched 4- and 6-spoke Egyptian designs. One even had a gold-like shimmer, though no samples were removed due to legal barriers. As word of the findings spread, footage began to surface online, raw, shaky, but powerful. And almost as quickly, it started vanishing. Platforms took videos down. Copyright strikes appeared. Pages were flagged. Some said it was misinformation. Others suspected something more calculated. But the footage kept reappearing. People made copies. Screen recordings. Backups. And the internet, hungry for mystery, ran wild. Commentators argued. Scholars fought. But one thing was clear, this wasn't just a story anymore. It was a movement. Ron Wyatt's long-ridiculed theories were getting a second look. His critics were being forced to reread his notes. Review his coordinates. Rewatch his old interviews. Because if even part of what he said was true, then maybe the Exodus wasn't just a story. Maybe it was history. And if that was true, what else might be buried beneath our assumptions? That's the question now fueling a modern wave of biblical archaeology. Expeditions are launching to Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia, once dismissed, now under active study using drone mapping, heat signatures, and 3D terrain analysis. New teams are scanning Turkey's mountains for petrified wood from NOAA's Arkansas. AI-assisted imaging tools are sweeping ancient caves near the Dead Sea, where some believe more hidden scrolls are buried. Satellites are being used to analyze sediment shifts and microanomalies underground, spots where old civilizations might lie untouched. This isn't science fiction. This is real. We're no longer relying on shovels and legends. We're using code. Algorithms. Machine learning. We're digging with data. And we're finding things that don't fit the neat boxes history has drawn. Which brings us back to the Red Sea. What's down there could change the story of how we understand history, faith, and fact. Maybe we were never meant to find it, until now. Maybe it was waiting for a generation that could finally see. Because faith isn't the opposite of evidence. It's the hope that evidence will one day arrive. And maybe that day just came. Because faith isn't the opposite of evidence. It's the hope that evidence will one day arrive. And maybe that day just came. But what happens now? What do you do when something you've always believed might suddenly be proven, not by faith alone, but by fragments of bone, metal, and memory? What does it mean when the sea gives up secrets buried for thousands of years? Secrets that echo a story told and retold across generations, across continents, across religions. The world isn't just watching, it's waking up. People who haven't cracked open a Bible in decades are now Googling Nuweiba Beach. Teachers are revisiting their lesson plans. Pastors are rewriting sermons. Journalists are scrambling for interviews with anyone who's ever said, "I think there's truth in the Exodus." The skeptics? They're louder than ever. But so are the believers. And somewhere in between sits a growing crowd of the curious. The people who don't need to see every answer, but just need a reason to start asking questions again. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the Red Sea didn't just hide a battlefield. Maybe it protected a story until we were ready to hear it. Not blindly, not naively, but with open minds and sharpened tools. For centuries, archaeology has been considered a discipline of patience. Of dust and brushes. But this new wave? It's fast. It's digital. It's global. AI scans are already being fed sonar footage from the divers. Image recognition algorithms are picking up unnatural geometries, metallic signatures, and density shifts in the sediment layers. Some of the data points line up with old expedition notes, ones dismissed decades ago. Others point to areas no one's ever explored. Yet. Remote sensing satellites are being redirected. Funding is flowing in, not just from churches or religious organizations, but from tech companies, philanthropists, and yes, even curious governments. Because here's what's really at stake: if even one piece of the Exodus is provably true, then the floodgates open. Not just for believers, but for historians, for scientists, for anyone who's ever dared to ask if maybe, just maybe, we got some of the story wrong. And maybe that's why there's resistance. Why footage disappears. Why researchers get quiet. Because truth, when it starts to rise, rattles more than just old frameworks, it challenges the people and powers who built their version of history around silence. But this time, the silence isn't holding. The divers didn't just film underwater relics. They filmed a moment. A shift. A disruption. One that can't be unseen. What they found wasn't polished enough to be paraded in a museum, but it was powerful enough to spark a worldwide reckoning. And now the ripple effects are spreading. Expeditions are mobilizing. Not just to the Red Sea, but to the deserts of Arabia. The cliffs of Mount Ararat. The lost cities under the sands of Egypt. The waters are stirring, figuratively and literally. There's a new kind of explorer now. They're not just scholars with trowels. They're data scientists with algorithms. Drone pilots with satellite feeds. Former Navy SEALs with theology degrees. Influencers live streaming from the edge of history. And they're not chasing myths for clicks. They're chasing something deeper. Something real. Something that connects us, not just to faith, or to fact, but to the idea that truth never disappears. It waits. It whispers from the deep. And when it's ready, it calls. So the question now isn't just what the divers found. It's what we'll do with it. Will we bury it again beneath doubt and delay? Or will we dig deeper? Ask harder questions. Pull more threads. Because if this story is true, if the seabed of the Red Sea holds the broken remnants of Pharaoh's final stand, then maybe the Bible isn't just a book of metaphors. Maybe it's a map. A historical record disguised as divine poetry. Maybe the miracles weren't exaggerations. Maybe they were eyewitness accounts, handed down, encoded in ancient language that we're only now beginning to decipher. And if that's the case, then we've barely scratched the surface. Because the Red Sea may have just opened the first door. But beyond it lie stories we've written off as legends, the Tower of Babel, the walls of Jericho, the Ark of the Covenant. What if they're not lost? What if they're waiting? What if AI is the key that unlocks the vault of ancient memory? What if we were born in a generation not just of technology, but of rediscovery? You don't need to believe everything. You don't need to accept every claim. But you do need to look. To ask. To stay curious. Because curiosity isn't the enemy of belief. It's the beginning of it. And whether you're a scholar, a skeptic, a believer, or just someone who stumbled across this video, you're part of this moment now. This isn't just a dive. It's a wake-up call. Something happened beneath the Red Sea. Something the world wasn't ready to see. Until now. So if you're watching this and you're feeling that pull, that sense that something ancient just tapped you on the shoulder, don't ignore it. Dive deeper. Research the Exodus. Look up Ron Wyatt. Read the book of Exodus for yourself. Study the maps. Explore the counterarguments. Don't take anyone's word for it, not even ours. Let truth find you the way it's always meant to, unexpectedly, unmistakably, and at just the right time. Because maybe the most powerful discoveries aren't made with shovels. Maybe they're made in moments, like this one. When the past reaches through the noise and says, I'm still here. Waiting. Watching. Whispering. And if you're still listening, still with us at this point, then maybe you're part of this story too. Maybe you were meant to see this. To hear this. To wonder what else the world forgot. And if that's true, then this isn't the end. It's the beginning. The beginning of rediscovery. The beginning of a world where faith and fact walk hand in hand, not in conflict, but in alignment. A world where ancient stories rise from the sea to remind us that truth, no matter how deep it's buried, always finds its way back to the surface. Thank you for watching. Stay curious. Stay bold. And we'll see you in the next dive.